So we're actually going to put this debate on hold for just a few moments, and I'm going to make my way towards the fireside chat. I'm going to ask Joy Chik to please come on stage with us. She's the Corporate Vice President for the Identity Division in Microsoft's Cloud and AI Group. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Julia.
Please have a seat.
It's great for me to be here. Quite an honor.
So, Joy, just to make it clear the parameter on which you operate, your team is responsible for building all of Microsoft's identity technologies and services. That implies securing about 1 billion identities, consumers around the world, so it's quite a parameter there. But so we've invited you today because there is no security indeed if there's without identity. The first thing we all have to do is to log in, and it's the first thing that hackers go for. So tell us a little bit more about why identity is so important.
Yeah, first of all, so I run the identity division, which basically I think most of the audience, maybe our customers. So my team sees the importance of identity as the front door for cybersecurity, kind of as like first line of all the investigation we do. Julia, just like you said, because with all we move to the cloud with all the services, applications we log in, identity is the first thing you do, which is you sign in. So that becomes the first thing that hackers attack. And the reality is, we all have multiple devices, multiple applications, and we sign in from many different places. But the only thing there is one of is you. So security starts with identity. And now with everything's interconnected, and the reality is that identity is the only system that provides the effective access control. And when we think about identity beyond just humans, not just the employees or consumers, but also the business partners of the enterprise or government, or also like with gig economy, in retail or the gig workers, and more than humans, including IoT devices, including all the bots, they each have an identity, and that is why it's so important to protect them.
So in the second part and the third part of the debate, we're going to be asking whether the end user should be the weak or the strong link. I'd like to have your take on this. Should the end user be trusted?
I would say the question the other way, which is it's not about whether I trust you as Julia. Of course I trust you. So it's not about trusting the end user as much as about should I trust the signing from you. So, you can be Julia signing, but it could be your system is hacked, so it'd be somebody else, like the hacker, signing on behalf of you. What we really say, I think the kind of previous speakers touched on, which is while there are many users, many devices, applications, networks, we really should assume that any of these vectors can be compromised. And we call that as a zero trust approach. And in that case, we basically treat everything as on the open internet. So we never trust, we always verify.
Right.
And then the most important thing for identity is how do we explicitly verify user more than just a password.
Now, we were just talking about user experience and how important that is. How do you make the process of signing in a little bit smoother to then be able to bring security in?
Yeah, so as we know today, we all use many different services and mobile applications. Unfortunately, each of them require us to use a different username and a password. And so the end result is this multiply really quickly. So usually customers or consumers are trying to do is they share the same passwords, and they can easily be stolen, and it's really hard to remember them, because it's very hard to remember big, complex password. So what we're really trying to say is one thing Microsoft does is we support open standards-based authentication. And what that means is when I can sign into a device that's trusted and verified the user, then the device can sign into all these different applications on behalf of the user. So that means you only have one username, password, while after you successfully signed in turn, that device signs into all these different applications, which gives you a much seamlessly experience. But at the same time, you still need a stronger way than just simply passwords to sign in. So using like multi-factor authentication is a more stronger way to verify a user. But unfortunately, many customers, whether consumer or enterprise, they don't quite turn on multi-factor authentication because it impacts the user experience.
So precisely, how do you improve user experience when it comes to multi-factor authentication?
Yeah, and I think earlier speakers touched on that as well. What we call is conditional-based multi-factor authentication, which means, for example, Julia, if you're at work, check your email, you're in a secure network, we don't need to prompt you for multi-factor authentication. But if you are connecting from the cafe, you're trying to read the sensitive data from your work, then we probably would want to prompt you for a multi-factor authentication. And even better yet, one of the things that Microsoft we get over 100 trillion signals from all the cloud services. So with machine learning and AI, we're able to do risk-based conditional access for identity protection. And what that means is instead of just prompt you, we learn your behavior of signing behavior. And I use myself as an example. I'm here in France, but if somehow at this moment, somebody signing on my behalf in Seattle, US, that is a suspicious behavior. And at that point, we probably want to say, hey, maybe my account is being compromised. And that's when we can automate the policy such that can be actually, block my sign-in the next time I come in because that means my account is being compromised.
Now, over at Microsoft, you believe that the future lies in the end of passwords altogether. So I guess my question is, what's the alternative? Is it a PIN? Is it facial recognition? And perhaps, what's the best alternative?
Yeah, and getting rid of passwords, now it's become an international movement. For example, it's actually on the agenda at this year's World Economic Forum. So from our perspective, what's better way to replace password than who we are as a person, like our facial recognition, biometric, and that along with something we have, like most of us have a mobile phone, or you have a smart card, or USB key. It's really the combination of something we have, along with something we are, a much stronger way to truly verify a user as who that person is.
So let's now talk about Microsoft's Authenticator app. It's a good example of how to avoid the use of passwords altogether.
Yeah, so the Microsoft Authenticator app uses two-factor authentication. One is obviously the phone that you have, and then the second factor is any of the facial recognitions like fingerprint that phone supports. So that is a very secure as well as much better experience to authenticate user. And in fact, we actually have today 100 million users across our enterprise and consumer users that are actively using passwordless options with Authenticator app. In addition to the app, we actually have Windows Hello, which is baked into many of the devices. That is also a FIDO 2.0, FIDO, which is a fast identity online open standards. So that's another way of authenticate use passwordless.
Now, speaking of FIDO, could you perhaps share with us the engagement with the consortium you're working with startups when it comes to that?
So Microsoft is actively participating. Frankly, we are the biggest contributor to the open standards in general. So we're active in the FIDO community, and our mission is we know that we cannot be the only one creating passwordless options for all the users around the world. We really have to work with the industry. So we've been partnered with companies like Ubico, TELUS, Paytm, so that we can create an ecosystem of all the different passwordless security keys across the spectrum.
So I guess my I'd like to have your perspective on the future. What do you think lies ahead in terms of identity?
Yeah, we also think the future, identity is not just driven for security, but it also protects privacy. So we talk about how do you create a decentralized identity system that not a single organization or government owns, but it's owned by the individual. And the reason we want to do that is precisely so that the data stays with the individual rather than an organization or government. And that actually means that you, Julia, you can still try to ask me for all my credentials, but I do not have to send you all that information so that then your company becomes liable for all that data. But instead, we're using blockchain technology so that the data stays with me, but you can verify those data through the blockchain so that you can trust it. So you can still conduct business while the data stays with the user and really respect the privacy of the users. And so we're actually doing a pilot with the UK National Health Services so that doctors can use decentralized identity in order to prove their credentials to the different hospitals.
Now, I'd like to close off this interview to try to, once again, have your perspective. You've been at Microsoft for over 20 years now. Microsoft has undergone a digital transformation, a cultural transformation. So tell us more about that.
Yeah. Being Microsoft for over 20 years, see the rise of the .com and then sort of the slowdown and then the rise of the cloud age. Really, what we've been doing differently in the last, I would say, 10 years is what the first thing is how do you really be more customer focused? So, for example, I'm actually running the engineering team at Microsoft, but I actually come regularly around the world to talk to customers so that I can learn how customers truly use our products, especially in the cloud age, everything moves so fast. And then the second part I would say is Satya Nadella talks a lot about growth mindset. And it really is, we all make mistakes, and also our products, technology evolves quickly. It's really not about who's right, who's wrong. It's about how can we continuously learn and iterate. And especially in the cybersecurity space, I can't agree more that user experience and security go hand in hand. And so how do we evolve this together with all the customers, the consumers, is critical. And the last I would just touch, which is the culture on inclusion. Because we, building the products for everybody in the world. And to us as a company, to myself, it is really important we have a diverse workforce that work at Microsoft, but also just have an inclusive culture so that everybody can bring the best version and their authentic self.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Joy Chik.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.